Hey guys, this is Vince with Practical Performance again. This is part 2 of the installation series of the convertible specific front gusset cups for the VinceBar kit. And in part 1 we left off where I had drilled through with a hole saw, sort of cleaned this up, and said that the next step will be to grind these, see if I can get that to focus again. Grind these to MIG welds flat. We will also be punching down this kind of ridge thing. I don't know how to make that focus, I'm sorry. This ridge thing here. And this is of course to make the bottom part of the gusset cup sit flush with the top surface of the subframe mount, which is this here. We will also punch this little, I don't know what you would call this. It's a piece here that comes out a little bit. I will be using, so I removed the guide rod from the hole saw. This makes for an excellent punch. We'll be using, I guess, the large end to flatten that ridge there. Maybe use this side to sort of punch that in and maybe sort of flatten that out. But before we get there, I want to just take this opportunity to point out why we're doing this again. Fortunately, my convertible is not cracked. Unfortunately, that's kind of bad for the demonstration purpose. So therefore, in the description of this video, I'm adding a link to a movie I made several years ago, a video I made several years ago, which clearly shows the damage and how it sort of progresses. And I did that on an M3. So if you have an M3 convertible, or if you have a any other convertible that's been, abused, you will definitely see cracks up here. So anyway, the MIG welds here, you have a heat affected zone around them. That's typically where the cracks start, where the sharp edges around the MIG welds are. And this is because so imagine this is the subframe, the stud that sits from the underside. Obviously it goes up into a blind hole. You wouldn't see that hole. But anyway, as you are accelerating and braking, it goes up and down. And as you take corners, it will sort of bend and twist like this, back and forth. So this makes for, the subframe mount itself, the sleeve is in there. The only thing holding it up here is these welds. So obviously it's going to break off, crack around the welds and create a lot of cracks. Anyway, so I suggest you view that video. It's very informative, I hear. I like it myself, and you'll see why we need to cover this area with the bottom side of the gusset cup, which is 2 millimeters thick. This is, by the way, 2 millimeters thick. It's not 1.5, as I said previously. So it's kind of sturdy. It's very sturdy. And we're going to be connecting this via the tube in the front gusset cup and the faceplate to this sturdy piece of structure. So, having that said, I will go off. I'll take my Dremel with a grinding disc. I'll grind these down flat, and I'll check in with you before we start punching down the other stuff. But before we punch down those ridges and edges, you know what? I realized that it's a good idea because there still is some wiggle going on, even though we have the guide sleeve. You can see that on one side, if I push it all the way to the right in this picture, it goes down kind of smoothly. If I push it to the left side, it does hit the corner there. So before doing anything else, and again, this is the sturdy 2 millimeter, let's run this down again, once by going to the left and once by going to the right, and just making sure that we have enough room for the gusset cup. So there was some material to remove. So before we, and that was a good thing we got that out. You could see that it was mostly to the left side there on this side. Yeah, left side in terms of how we're viewing this, I should say. Now, so before I go off and punch the bottom side there and so on, I will deburr that. It is a bit tricky to get the grinding disc down into there, but if you finagle it a bit, you should be able to get a result, something like this. What you're looking for is removing the high spots. Once you've done that, you're good. So that's the ground down MIG welds, and I'm going to continue with a ridge thing here and punch that area over there. So this is the result. I've punched down the ridge, combination of the thick end and the thinner end of the rod using a small sledgehammer, and also the Dremel a little bit. I had, let's see if I can get that. I had a little bit of an issue with this layer here, where it's cut down here. This is difficult. See if I can get it to focus there. There you go. So this edge here was a little bit folded inward, so I try to push that out, and then I use the Dremel disc to sort of get that edge off. You want to make sure that you have a reasonably flat surface there, where none of the bottom side of the gusset cup is sort of hung up on something. So that's good for now, and then the next step will be to go on the underside, drill the 10.5 millimeter drill bit up through there, and then thread the hole. So all these parts, the rod, the sleeve, the bore, the hole saw, the 10 millimeter, the long 10 millimeter drill bit, and the 10.5 millimeter drill bit, and the threading tap are part of the optional, but very highly recommended tooling kit. Maybe it's not even optional for the convertible. You really need these parts. So anyway, off to the underside. We're now on the underside again, and the first thing we'll do is remove the bracket and the guide sleeve, because at this point we don't need that anymore. We're just going to drill up through the mount with a standard length 10.5 millimeter drill bit and then tap it. There we go. So once that's removed, use your trusted whatever power drill, the 10.5 millimeter drill bit, as I said, and we're just going to drill up through this, removing just slightly some of the there you go. It's just a short bit up there that is drilled through the actual mount that we need to enlarge from 10 to 10.5. Even so, even though it's just a little bit, I highly recommend use some kind of protective goggles or something, because there can be some nasty shaves coming out. Once that's done, you will notice there's not a lot of material being removed. We're going to use the threading tap to thread the hole, not tap the hole. I keep saying that, I'm sorry. And it's not metal shaves, it's metal shavings. I'm getting my terminology wrong. Anyway, so this tap is actually not quite long enough to go far up enough to still have a reasonable grip on this, but I'm quite happy with this actually. The taps that I have sourced have a 1/4 inch, the square part there. So you can use just an ordinary, which I've added here, ordinary 1/4 inch extension for your socket kit. And let's see, doing this with one hand, you just stick it in like that, and voila, you have a long threading tap, which helps keep the cost down. So anyway, I'm using a tool like this. You can use just whatever 1/4 inch what do you call it, a wrench or an adjustable wrench or whatever. The important part is that when you thread, so you will be entering, you need to get into the actual existing thread correctly. So there you go. Now it's going to be easy to thread it, screw it in, or quite a distance. And then as you get to a point where you feel resistance, go a half turn, just back off, go a half turn, back off, and so on and so forth. That way you'll get the best thread. So once through all the way, and you can see the tap is all the way up there, you will feel that the resistance pretty much is gone. That's when you're done. And we're ready to, actually we're at this point ready to add the gusset cup and kind of go from there. I'll get back to you. I realized, just to avoid any confusion, once you've turned it all the way up, obviously you back it out the same way. You don't try to force it through. And the benefit of bringing it out this way, which is the correct way, is you will also be clearing the threads. You will feel there is some resistance, and you will see some metal shavings falling out of the hole. So that's the way you do it. On the top side, you can now see that the thread, which previously stopped in a blind hole, a bottom hole, now goes all the way through and up through that last part. You can also see some metal shavings there from the tap running through the hole and cutting threads. So that's what you want. Before test fitting the actual gusset cup with the faceplate, oh, there you go, sorry. What you want to do is make sure that you can have this, because this piece is going back, it needs to sit flush like this. And I realized while checking this that while removing it, see if that we can have that show, there is a little bit of an edge there when I cut it down, so cut through. So if this piece goes a little bit too far outbound, it will be sitting on that edge there. And you will not see that when you have the faceplate, and it's going to be tricky. So what I'll do is see if it fits there with the large gap. But if I have it up like that, it's not correct. So make sure that these corners, the one there and the one there, are kind of cut to a square corner, so you don't have any edges or stuff like that sitting there. I used a combination of the hacksaw blade to cut down like that and in like that, and the file once again to get rid of any excess weld that was still there. And now it all fits good. So no matter if I have it all the way to the left here, it fits and it's flush, or on the right side. So this will make it so much easier later on. I also made sure that the bottom side of this, there was some weld still there as well, was removed. So there you go, it sits correctly. Now that we have prepared for a correct fitment of the cutout piece, it's time to have a look at the gusset cups themselves. So there's two versions. There's the epoxy rivet, and then there's the weld-in version. The epoxy rivet version, as you can imagine, has the smaller rivet holes. It also has this reinforcement piece that goes behind the faceplate, and it sandwiches the cutout piece between the faceplate of the gusset cup and the reinforcement piece. The weld version does not need that, and it has the, apart from having the larger plug weld holes, it has these weld slots. So the weld slots allow us to weld not only the faceplate to the actual structure here, and through those holes into the cutout piece, it also allows us to weld these cuts through the slots like that. Now, because of these two versions, I initially said that part 2, this part would include the cutting, well, actually the drilling holes and all that stuff for the epoxy rivet version. But I decided to make put that into part 3, so there will be a part 3 for the epoxy rivet version, and there will be a part 3 for the weld-in version. Actually, so let's see where I put that. So another difference here would be that the nut, the backside, the weld nut there For the epoxy rivet version, we will be removing that, and it will be replaced by this nut here. The Weldon version, as it doesn't have the reinforcement piece, we keep that nut. So that's a distinct difference between the two versions as well. So off to the actual installment episodes. Episode 3, part 3 for the epoxy rivet, and part 3 for the weld version, depending on what you have purchased.